Hello there. I'm already into this cigar a little bit, so we'll just get started. I've got about this much time with you. And the idea I had for today's video was I wanted to talk about my first sort of inspiration and philosophy, the guy who really got me started, who's Seneca. Seneca the Younger, the great Roman philosopher. Um, and the quote I want to talk about today, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't exactly remember the specific wording, but the general gist of the quote is it's not that we live short lives, but that we waste much of it. Um, people will say, oh, life is short and all that. And Seneca's basically making the counterpoint it's really not. You're just wasting your time. Um, I believe I've mentioned this in a previous video, but Seneca was the first philosopher that I read. His work is very concise and it's very dense. So you can reread the same quote multiple times, continue to learn and gain wisdom from it. And as my first introduction to philosophy, I found him very inspiring. And I found his work somewhat addictive because I kept rereading them and figuring out new applications for the ideas that he was proposing. And this is one of those quotes that you have to go back to from time to time and relate it to your life over and over again in different ways because it is not that our lives are short, but that we waste much of it is one of those quotes that um, it can really bother you because it's a very severe judgment of you. That quote is definitely a judgment of you. I mean, basically, if you haven't accomplished your dreams and you're sitting around, woe is me, life is so short, it's passing me by, it's not. You're just not spending your time efficiently. You're not investing in things that really matter, according to Seneca, not according to me. I'm not telling you if you're spending your time wisely or not. Um, And one of the things I like about that quote a lot is that it's actually very agnostic to how you're spending your time. Um, it really kind of leaves the job of determining whether that's true to you. Um, it's like if you are plagued by anxiety and feel like your life is short, that the reason for that is likely that deep down you're not spending your time correctly. You're not spending your time well. Um, and because we're in the new year, I'm going to sort of tie this into a New Year's resolution, which I established for myself in the last month of 2024. And my New Year's resolution was that, excuse me, I'm not going to spend time and energy in places or people that make me feel weak. And the more specific definition is I'm not going to spend my time or energy in places or people who do not make me feel powerful. And basically, the premise here is um, in order for this year to be a year that I look back on with um, confidence and pride, it needs to be a time and a place of growth and accomplishment for me. The people who surround me either need to build me up or move me forward. The places and the energy I'm spending on things need to either affirm me or correct me. And this is a year of growth and accomplishment for me. And the way that I intend to do that is a little bit less specific than normal. But because the proposition is so generic, it should, in theory, apply to most things that I'm doing, most places I'm spending my time. I will either get a feeling this was worth doing or this wasn't worth doing. This person is worth spending my time with or they're not. I feel more on the path or less on the path after this. And that's how I'm analyzing 2025. I'm going to be thinking about this. when I'm doing things? Is this affirming? Is this causing me growth? Is this an obstacle? Do I feel like I'm getting derailed? And if I am, I'm going to leave those things behind because, like Seneca said, it's not that our lives are short, it's that we waste much of it. Um, for most of my life, I've been content to entertain my own delusions. As I've said in previous videos, I would spend time playing League of Legends and was kind of in the top echelon of the player base, but never good enough to really compete professionally. And I remember the exact day that I realized that. And I've had a few of these moments in my life, and this is the reason why I encourage people to do things that are competitive, especially young men who might be tempted to envision themselves in these arenas where they could potentially accomplish some kind of grandeur or elevate themselves into some space where they're respected or admired, etc. I remember in League of Legends, I was at the I was in the top 0.6% of the player base in a game with millions of users, which translates into rank 3,500. I was frequently in games with the absolute best players in the world. I would I would wind up in games with pro players all the time, and often I would win my lanes against them, or sometimes I would lose my lanes against them. But the point is, I was somewhat competitive, although most of them weren't trying very hard in these games, if I'm being honest, looking back. And I was what you would call a sweat. I was trying as hard as I could, and that's how I was able to be in that kind of in the mix with these players who realistically were better than me. And I had sort of a chip on my shoulder because I'm thinking, well, hey, I deserve to be here. So I would go into game and play my ass off and do my best. And I remember distinctly there was an up and coming team called Dignitas. And there was this player who just joined the game, and his name was Skara. I had already been playing the game for almost a year at this point. And Skara was a mid laner, um, which is a carry role. So he could carry the games, which, just if you don't know what that means, he could be the influencing factor that would cause a team to win. Um, every team needs playmakers and all of this kind of thing. So, and not every player can be it, but he was definitely a playmaker. Um, and when he joined this game, within 6 months of a fresh new account, he skyrocketed through the ranks all the way to top 100. He blew right past me, and this was the reason it was painful, is because I had put in my best effort. I had gotten to rank 3,500, and then this kid who comes on and starts playing blows right past me. And the worst part about it was he played about 3 hours a day, 4 times a week, 3 or 4 times a week. He was in school full time doing this casually. And I was playing 12 to 16 hours a day every single day. I didn't even really have a job at this time. I was what you would call a no-lifer. I was playing this game all the time. Um, and this happens for different people in different ways, but for me, this was my encounter with LeBron James, Michael Jordan. This was my encounter with Mike Tyson. This was my encounter with Michael Phelps. This is my encounter with Usain Bolt. This was my audition with Michael Jackson, if you will. I encountered greatness, and the thing that was so amazing was I would occasionally wind up in games with him, and the impact that he would have on the game was so different than everyone else. It was like other people weren't even trying when they were in the same matches with him. So I spent some time and decided to watch his stream because he streamed a little bit. And what became obvious to me immediately was that actually he wasn't really trying that hard. Um, he was like reading the chat and, like of his stream and just kind of like casually playing. And he was that good. And that was the day I knew, oh, I can't go pro in this game. I could never go pro in this game. It didn't cause me to quit right away, but it was sort of the beginning of the end for me in that game. Because what it made me realize was my options are basically either to stream this game casually, um, and make money as a streamer, or I got to find something else to do because this really isn't going to work long term. I'm trying to repair my cigar. If you're wondering what the hell I'm doing right now, I'm just trying to figure out a solution that will last long enough to get me through it. But at some point, this entire wrapper might come off. It's not looking promising right now. I may end up just smoking a binder. We'll see. Um, so it sort of forcefully narrowed my options in my mind that I was willing to entertain for what this game was going to be to me. And I had a small fan base that was very loyal, and a lot of them would ask me, when are you going to go pro and things like that. And after I saw Scara fly through the ranks like that, I would tell people I'm not actually good enough to go pro. And my stream would that they're very nice to me. They would say, "Yes, you are. Don't give yourself, don't sell yourself short and stuff like that." And I just knew I'm actually really not good enough to go pro. I've just witnessed it. And the thing that was so amazing was on the international scale, Scar wasn't even that good. The players in Korea and even a lot of the players in Europe were so much better. Um, Scar could hang with European players, but not really with the Korean and the Chinese players. Um, it was it was amazing to witness. And then later, I had the same thing happen to me when I was kickboxing. I joined this kickboxing gym, and I got kind of serious. I thought I was going to go pro at one time. When I started, I thought I was going to go pro, and sort of gradually realized that my body's not really. It's not really It's not really designed for it. It's not really durable enough for it. I'm not a bad fighter. Um, I'm a tricky fighter. I've got good techniques, and I'm very good at masking what I'm gonna do. Um, and my defense is okay, but there's some people out there whose bones are just built differently. I think of like an Alex Pereira, um, fighting Izzy, um, and I'm not comparing myself to Izzy, but if you were going to use those two as an example, I would be more like him. I'd be more crafty, skill oriented, and Alex is just this punishing destroyer with bones that will, make you wish you didn't get in there with him. I don't have that at all. I have kind of thin hands and thin wrists, and I'm strong, but I'm not this genetic destroyer with massive bones and things like that. Never have been. At the time I started kickboxing, I I weighed 125 pounds and I was 5'11". And I put on so much muscle in 6 months that my parents thought I was on steroids. I went up to 145. I got kind of cut, diced up like, I don't know, not like Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was more, but that kind of thing where everything was defined. You could see every single muscle. It was kind of crazy looking. And we had this kid in our gym, um, who his hand speed was so unbelievable, and he was very technical, very hard to hit. Um, and he had an amateur record of 4, 5, 6, 7-0. I think he got to something like that. Maybe it was 6-0. It was something in that neighborhood between 4 and 7-0. And we all thought he was just the future. I mean, this kid was unstoppable. He would beat the crap out of people who were much bigger than him. And it was so unbelievable because he went pro really early, and I do think that that was a big mistake, for the reason I'm about to tell you, which is that in his first fight, he got absolutely destroyed. And if you're just measuring on a skill basis, he was pretty far ahead of everyone else, and he got trashed. Um, and there was this kind of surreal moment in the gym where we all kind of realized, like, wow, this ladder is way different than it's way different than we thought. Um, the best fighters in the world are a lot better than we thought they were, because this guy just got beat by some nobody, and he's one of the more skilled people in our gym. And the interesting thing was, it just didn't work the way you thought it would, because we had this other guy who was hard bones, hard body, not really tall enough for his division, um, but pretty athletic, hard headed, hard puncher. And he would go in and walk through people. He would knock people out while they're wearing headgear. And it was just fascinating to see, like, the kind of thing that you thought was going to work didn't always work, and the things you didn't think would work kind of worked. Anyway, the reason I went through all of that is because these were hobbies, or you could call them delusions, if you will, but things that I was passionate about, and I sort of used them as a means to distract myself from the fact that, one, my life didn't have a greater transcendental defining purpose, but two, um, they were maybe not the best place for me to spend my time, even though they were the place that I spent most of my time. And even still, because they were my paths, because I chose them, um, they were beneficial to me in the long run. And so I would do them and learn things from them. And um, I will say doing them was better than not doing them, because at the time I was totally wasting my time. I wasn't doing anything, really. I had a boring job that I didn't like, and I got no meaning from it. I didn't have my purpose in place. And so to do anything outside of work and take it seriously is good, especially if you don't know what your purpose is yet. But I can confidently look back and say I was delusional if I thought that I was going to do either one of those things at a high level. I wasn't playing into my strengths. I wasn't playing into my gifts, my talents, my natural born talents. And it took a lot of time for me to realize that. Um, I had to do a lot of maturing and growth. And then once I did kind of understand what my talents were, um, strangely, I continued to waste most of my time, and in some ways wasted even worse than I did before I knew what my strengths were. Um, and I've found as I've grown older that I actually think it was the fear of success that prevented me from pursuing my talents more so than the fear of failure. I can deal with failure. Failure, in a cosmic sense, in a grandiose sense, is indistinguishable from inaction. You know, if you never succeed, it's like you never started in terms of the cosmic scales. And when I look back on my life, I've never regretted a failure. The only things I've really kind of and you'll hear people say this, but I'm just relaying that it's the case for me. I'm 36 years old. I've lived a little bit of life. I've never looked back on something and said, "Wow, I wish I didn't try that at all." Because even when it doesn't really work, I'm able to cross it off the list. And when you cross it off the list, that means that your list of options gets a little tighter. And in theory, you become more focused and you become more able to go all in on something that really is a better fit for you. But also, with the learnings and any particular skill sets you might get, like I became much more mentally tough from doing kickboxing. I learned that there are different levels of pain, and you can handle a lot more pain than you think you can. And in fact, if you get used to it, it doesn't even hurt anymore. I talked about this in a previous video, but what the word hurt means changes. It's interesting because hurt to a trained fighter is that word means more like unable to continue, debilitated. You're stopped. And the pain doesn't even really become relevant to the word hurt anymore. I think we've reached the point where we're getting rid of this wrapper. I'm just going to see how long this binder and filler lasts. So that's interesting to know. And regret is, in my experience, mostly reserved for things you didn't do, or sometimes for people you hurt, the way you handle the situation. But it's rarely for, I didn't accomplish this goal that I set out to accomplish. It has never been that in my case. And so the fear of not wanting to engage with my gifts is more like a fear of success because succeeding would radically change my life. And my life was just starting to get comfortable for the first time in some ways. And indeed, my life has never been more enjoyable now. And because of that, if I succeed in my private endeavors, um, I have more to lose today than I did 5 or 10 years ago. It's very paradoxical. But because the adventure of your life is really a one-way street and you never know until you go and try things, um, I've decided that it's worth trying. Um, and for that reason, I've made the resolution to spend time in people and places who make me feel powerful, who make me feel like I'm on the right path, who build me up, who encourage me, who want to see me succeed, who invest their time and who prioritize me. Many times in my life, I've prioritized other people, and it doesn't always pay out the way you think it's going to. I've made moves for people, I've made sacrifices for people, I've skipped jobs for people. And rarely does that pay out in the way you would hope it would when you're making that decision. And so I don't always encourage you to do that. I think that you can do that if you have um, a very, very good reason. But I think for the most part, you would be better off asking for forgiveness from someone than living in regret. Um, and the quote that it's not that we it's not that our lives are short, but that we waste much of it is very pertinent to this because if you just get serious and you stop wasting your time and you start living in compact, action dense days, you get a lot done. You're moving in a direction. What you're going to find is that people have more respect for that than they do for someone who sacrifices everything and stays in a position of inaction. They would rather that you get more done and expect more of them than you not offend them and expect nothing from them. People have an easier time dealing with you while you're successful, while you're striding, while you're moving forward. There's something kind of inspiring and compelling about a man who's in his purpose, who's moving towards something. And the specific thing doesn't have to work. That's the interesting thing. You can fail and people will still forgive you as long as they see that you're applying the effort. As long as they see that you're moving in a direction, they will view you as a man who's on his path, who's in his purpose, and who's discovering what the walk of life that he wants to take is. And they will be sympathetic to the idea that, this person is not wasting his time. And the reason people are usually sympathetic to that is that it's so rare to see someone who spends their time well, who activates on so many levels and pushes the boundaries of what are possible for a person. It's so rare for someone to spend a full day at work and then get home and take on a side project. That's just not that common. What most people do is go to work, come home, turn on the TV, and veg out for the rest of the night, and then they repeat. And maybe they'll drink to forget about the fact that they're not really accomplishing anything outside of their job. Um, and, maybe your job is your life purpose. Maybe from the time you were little, you envisioned yourself as a doctor, and the fact that you do 60 hours of work as a doctor helping your community, that's all you have energy for and time for. That's totally fair. I'm not saying you have to have side projects outside of your job. All I'm saying is this message is for people who feel that their life is very short and that it's running past them. And Seneca's explanation for that is, well, it's probably not that it's short, it's probably that you're wasting your time that you feel that way. And so if you just wasted less time, you wouldn't feel that your life is short. You would feel that your life is full. And I'm proposing that if your life was truly full, most people would be sympathetic to that, and they would be inspired by you, and they would be thankful to have you around. So if people aren't acting that way towards you, there's a pretty good chance that they see you wasting your time. That has been my experience. When people have been disappointed in me, it's usually an accurate judgment of me wasting my time. And generally in my life, that's been in video games or dead end hobbies like my personal, um, fight training and things like that. Other people can see that it's a dead end before I do. And you can call that like my private delusion. You can call that my confidence. You can call that arrogance, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. The point is, they could tell before I could tell that it wasn't going to work. And sometimes they're wrong, and you actually do make it work. But sometimes people actually kind of know you, and the reason they're trying to encourage you to do something else is because you're not leaning into your skill set. You're not leaning into your strengths. So the cigar employs a method called Cuban sandwich, which is a blend of short and long filler, kind of a value-oriented cigar, and that's why I keep having to knock out little bits of filler as I'm smoking, get in my mouth and stuff. I don't smoke short filler cigars very often, but I wanted to give this one a try. The flavor's actually pretty good. So, um, it's actually really good for what it is. Um, so I guess that's kind of the premise of the video. Is there anything I want to add to this? I think I'm going to cut this video short. Um, it's a pretty simple concept. My New Year's resolution is to spend time in places that make me feel empowered and capable and motivated and inspired, um, and not to spend time in places that make me feel weak. And that is to coincide with one of the wisdoms that I've gleaned from Seneca, which is that life is not actually short. It's just that you're wasting it, that it feels short. There's a lot of time in the day, and if you took it seriously and you got a little disciplined, you could eke out a lot more. Um, I do think it's worth mentioning before I go that Seneca was the tutor to Nero, and Seneca is a little bit hard to read. The content in his philosophy is a little judgmental because he's a kind of a strict Stoic philosopher. And I don't think it's impossible that Seneca accidentally contributed to that by being a little bit too harsh on his student. And so I guess the last thing that I'll say is you need to start when you're ready. You need to go embark on your mission and your purpose when you're ready to start. I've delayed my mission and my purpose a lot for a long time. And I think part of the reason is because I didn't want to start having success before I understood what I was doing. And I didn't want to begin on this path until I knew um, what the goal of it was, what the purpose of it was. And I do know that now. I have enough clarity to know, and I'd be um, comfortable to accept the consequences of success. Um, and I think that failure would basically do nothing to my life. So there's no loss of time because what else would I be doing? Would I be playing a video game or something? I mean, that's not going to change the world at all. So I'm either going to fail and be irrelevant or succeed, and who knows what success could do. Um, and I'm curious to find out what success could be like in this space. So I waited until I was ready. And I think you should do the same. You should only start this process if you're ready for it, if you want it, if you want the outcome, you want the change. And there's nothing wrong with living a simple life if that's your goal. The purpose of this video is really for those of you who you're feeling the pang of guilt for your wasted time, and you're feeling like, gosh, I really should be doing more. I feel like I'm wasting my time, wasting my life. I'm not accomplishing anything that matters. Unfortunately, if you feel that way, it's almost certainly true. And you're not going to be able to unfeel it. It's kind of the curse of people who have the trait conscientiousness on the Big Five aspect scale. If you've never heard of Big Five aspect scale, there's some free tests. I think there's one on 1, 2, 3 or something. There's some tests that you could take for free. And I'm trying 1, 2, 3, Big Five or something like that. I'm trying to remember what the website is, but I can't remember. Big Five, 1, 2, 3, something like that. And you can take a free one. You can figure out what your conscientiousness is. And if your conscientiousness is over 50%, it's going to mean that you're either very organized or you're very hardworking and industrious, and you want to be productive all the time. And if you're the kind of person who wants to be productive all the time, you're going to feel a lot of guilt if you're not accomplishing things on a routine basis. And so, despite in my life not having the best cleanliness habits and things like that, not being the most orderly, organized person, I do have a pretty high level of industriousness, um, which propels me forward and puts me into a place where I'll feel guilt if I'm not accomplishing things. I need to basically feel like the time that I'm investing is accomplishing something, even my spare time, even my casual time. For a lot of my life, I couldn't relax. I was basically crippled by a sense of anxiety for my lack of accomplishing things with all this industrious energy I had. And not everyone has that. But if you do, um, you're probably going to feel like you're wasting a lot of time. And if you're one of those people who feels that, you probably are, because you probably have the potential for a higher purpose and the potential to accomplish something great. And I remember when I was scrolling through YouTube and playing games and doing all this stuff day in, day out, day after day, over and over again, this sense of kind of anxiety that would build up, and the knowledge that, this is not really accomplishing anything. This is just sort of cyclical. Um, there's kind of an intellectual, pardon the vulgar term, but like an intellectual masturbatory cycle where you're consuming content by yourself for yourself and you're not putting anything back into the world. And that did not sit well with me. It didn't feel like I was on the right path. Um, there's another problem with that too, which is that you'll run through your dopaminergic supply. So you basically have a limited amount of dopamine in the day. Um, and if you run out of dopamine, not just in a day, but in a week, let's say, because you can't really fully recharge it. Let's say you ran your dopamine down to zero. You can't really fully recharge it in a day. So you really need to like dopamine detox for a couple days so you can build up your supply so that you can experience meaning again and enter flow states and have meaningful work. And so I wasn't doing that. Um, I was running through all of my dopamine, which basically, when you do that, it's like self induced ADD. Um, you're not going to be able to focus on things because what people think dopamine is like a happy chemical, but what it really is it's your pursuit molecule. It's the thing that allows you to get into work and stay in work and forget that time exists so that work becomes kind of resistanceless. So if you run through all of it playing video games and indulging yourself or, watching a certain kind of video in your free time by yourself in a dark room, if you know what I mean, um, anything that is sort of pleasurable, you'll actually run through your pursuit molecule. You won't be able to work. You won't be able to chase as easily. And then you're going to have to rely heavily on discipline, and it's going to feel very unpleasant. It's going to be very hard to get into meaningful work. Or I should rephrase that. It may be impossible to do meaningful work, and all of your work may feel like a grind. And so you have to deliberately detox and do intentional rest. I'm not going to say a word like active rest. Intentional rest. Give yourself periods of time where you're purposefully not feeling joy so that you can do meaningful work later, and that the benefits of the work will outweigh whatever momentary pleasure you're going to have. The purpose of life is not to feel good or happy or to feel joy or anything like that. Um, First of all, because it isn't possible to feel joy all the time. So that means that if the purpose of your life, or at least I should say, if you think the purpose of your life is to feel joy, that means a significant portion of your life, you're not even going to be able to access the purpose because you're going to run out of dopamine. It's a big problem. For people who have decided that the purpose of their life is to feel pleasure, you're going to be sorely disappointed when you can't do it. And you're going to feel a lot of anxiety and you're going to feel like, wow, I'm missing out on life because other people are happy. They're not. No one is happy all the time. It's not possible. Um, one of the consequences of social media is that we see the best snippets of people's lives and then we decide that they're happy. So why am I not happy? They're not. They're miserable when they get home too. Um, well, they're miserable if they think the purpose of life is happiness. Affirmation and likes on social media are not going to make you feel fulfilled as a person. And so until I started detoxing and getting more intentional about how I spend my happiness molecules, which are really pursuit molecules, and saving some of them for work. I couldn't find meaning in work because I had run through all of that energy doing things that didn't accelerate my life. And as I've talked about in previous videos, one of the differences between a person who is fulfilled and secure across a long time frame and someone who is anxious and insecure is that they can delay gratification or they can't delay gratification. People who cannot delay gratification are always vulnerable. They're usually poor. They don't have security. They don't have self esteem. They don't have confidence. People who can delay gratification are very secure, very grounded, very stable, durable. They can handle a little bit of uncertainty and chaos, and they usually have enough cash because they're able to delay gratification to survive things that come out of left field. But another benefit is they're just better at working because they've saved their energy and their commitment for it. And then across life, their life gets very easy because they don't waste a lot of time and they don't waste a lot of energy. And so it's not that our lives are short, but that we waste much of it. Their lives become full because they have all this accomplishment and they have material benefits and they have esteem and they have respect and they have all of these things that make their life feel very rich. And really, it stems from being able to delay gratification and to having a better purpose for your life than something so naive and trivial as like happiness or pleasure or joy, which are wonderful things, but they are experiences. They are not the purpose of life. They are something that you enjoy for a moment and then they will leave you. And you're going to have to go back to the base of being content. The base is contentedness, it's not bliss, right? So when you can shift your perspective to, I'm going to go through happiness and I'm going to go through sadness, they're going to be experiences that come and go. But my core is not changed by feeling happy or not feeling happy. My core is I'm going to be okay tomorrow and I'm going to be okay the next day. And I'm going to be somebody who's stable and reliable and dependable, who doesn't waste time, who accomplishes things and is known and respected in my community as someone who you can rely on, who will get the job done, who will prepare for the flood, if you want to use biblical terms, build the ark. Because the story of the ark is actually somewhat an archetypal representation of the kind of people who are able to prepare, delay gratification, and who aren't. Everyone who dies in the flood laughs at Noah. Why are you building this stupid boat? Um, and Noah knows that he's received a higher calling to prepare for tomorrow, to prepare for tomorrow's calamity today, to spend today's excess energy preparing for tomorrow's catastrophe. And he does that, and then he accomplishes the salvation of the species and the people who, to use biblical language, deserved or required salvation. And basically, the low time preference is what saved humanity, according to the story of the flood. And this relates to Seneca's quote, because when Noah was spending his extra time building the ark, um, he wasn't he wasn't anxious. He wasn't trying to replace something. The people who were in the cities were partying and going after pleasure and lust and all these different things, which ended up destroying them. Whether that story is literal or a metaphor, I think that the takeaway is exactly the same, which is that the low time preference that Noah had was preferable to the high time preference that the degenerates had, to use crude language. And that time preference ended up being the key factor in his physical salvation and the salvation of others. And if you stopped wasting your time and you stopped wasting your energy, you could do the same for yourself and for your loved ones. You could be the person who builds the ark, no matter how small. It could just be enough money to survive a flat tire, right? Like your flood could be a flat tire, and you could just have enough money this time, and last time you didn't. and that would be great. And then you wouldn't feel like your time was wasted because this no longer throws your entire life out of whack. You actually did the prep work to be in a better position this time. And I guess to bring it full circle, if you're somebody who knows all of those things and you're sacrificing your goals and your needs and your expectations and your work, your time of work to appease people who have a very, very high time preference, meaning they need their joy now, and they will call you names if you don't spend your time and your energy and your money on them, and they actually make you weak. Now you're going to have the anxiety of the person with the high time preference and none of the benefits. So you really need to be a little bit greedy with your energy and your time, and you need to say, no, I have a plan. I know how we're going to get through this. You may not believe me right now, and if you decide not to come on this journey, that's understandable. But I'm going on this journey. You can come with, and people will gradually respect you more if you do that than if you fold and capitulate and waste your time and your energy and your money on them. So um, I think that's how we're going to close this video out. I'm at the end of the cigar pretty much. I got a little bit left, but probably going to just put it out. Thank you so much for watching. If you derived any value or you feel like there was something interesting in this, if you wouldn't mind sharing it with a friend so we can talk about it, head on down to the comments, type whatever you want, send it. I will respond. My channel is small enough. I will respond to every comment at this time. Subscribe, etc. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.